a quiet forest where the moonlight touched the leaves like soft silver rain, there lived a gentle elephant whose heart was as vast as the sky above him. He harmed no one, shared his food with smaller creatures, and carried the wounded to safety when storms raged through the woods. The animals trusted him, for his eyes spoke of peace and kindness. But one night, a sorrowful cry echoed through the valley, a cry that would change everything. Humans had entered the forest, not seeking harmony but wealth, their minds clouded by greed. The gentle elephant, unaware of their cruel intent, greeted them with kindness, as he always did. What followed became a legend whispered for centuries, a tale of compassion in the face of betrayal, of forgiveness born from pain. As you listen tonight, let the rhythm of this story calm your heart and wash away the weight of your day. Close your eyes and drift into the quiet world of the gentle elephant, where even suffering becomes a doorway to peace. Stay until the end, for within this tale lies a lesson that may soften your heart and remind you that true strength comes not from power, but from love. Welcome to Buddhism for Sleep, where ancient stories whisper peace into your dreams. In the stillness of an untouched forest where mist wove through ancient trees and sunlight shimmered through the canopy like liquid gold, there lived a great elephant known for his quiet grace. The forest stretched far beyond the eyes could see, filled with the songs of unseen birds, the rustling of leaves, and the gentle hum of life moving in perfect harmony. Streams wound like silver veins through emerald grass, and the air carried the scent of earth and rain. The elephant, though massive in body, carried a heart as soft as the morning fog. His presence brought calm to the creatures around him. Deer drank from pools at his feet, birds nested safely upon his back, and even the timid hare dared to sleep near his resting place. He was known by all simply as the Gentle One. Every dawn, as the first light touched the forest floor, he would rise and lift his trunk toward the sky, greeting the day in silent reverence. He felt connected to the rhythm of life itself, breathing in the peace that surrounded him and giving it back with every gentle step. There was no pride in his strength, no fear in his solitude. He lived simply, guided by the natural law that all beings deserve peace. Sometimes he would stop beside a withering plant and sprinkle it with water carried in his trunk. Other times, he would stand still for hours near a nest that had fallen, waiting until the frightened hatchlings found comfort again. The forest loved him, for his compassion flowed like a quiet river through every living thing. But deep within that beauty was the echo of change, as all peaceful places eventually face. One evening, as the sun melted into orange light and the forest prepared to sleep, the Gentle One felt an unease he could not name. The wind that once sang softly through the trees carried a strange scent smoke, and something metallic, sharp, unlike anything from his world. He lifted his head, ears wide, listening. Far away, a branch snapped, then another. The forest grew quiet, as though holding its breath. He did not yet understand what approached, only that it did not belong to the calm rhythm of life he had always known. He turned toward the source, his great feet silent upon the earth, his body blending into the dimming light. The other animals fled, darting through the shadows, whispering warnings in the only language they knew. Still, the elephant did not run. Fear was not part of his nature. He stood beneath an ancient banyan tree and waited, his heart steady, his breath slow. When the noise came closer, it was accompanied by the strange clatter of metal and the low murmur of human voices. He had seen humans before from afar, small creatures who moved swiftly and spoke loudly. Some brought gifts of fruit when passing through the forest, Others cut down trees but did not harm the living beings within. The Gentle One did not judge them. To him, every being carried both light and shadow. Yet tonight felt different. The voices were urgent, filled with a hunger he did not recognize. The men came into view, their torches flickering like tiny suns. They looked around with wide eyes, startled by the beauty that surrounded them. For a moment, the forest seemed to whisper to them to be still, to feel, to see. But their leader, a man with a sharp gaze and restless hands, broke the spell. "We'll camp here," he said. "Tomorrow, we search deeper. The stories say there's an elephant with tusks as white as the moon. That's the one we're after." The Gentle One listened from behind the trees, understanding little of their words, but sensing the vibration of their intent. Greed has its own sound, a harsh rhythm that disturbs the quiet heart. Still, he did not move. The men lit their fire, and its smoke curled into the sky like a warning. The smell of burning wood made him uneasy, yet he watched. When they slept, he approached quietly, drawn by curiosity. In the glow of the dying fire, he saw one man tossing in his sleep, clutching his leg. The scent of blood filled the air. The man was wounded. The Gentle One lowered his head and released a soft sound, a rumble deep and tender, the sound of empathy. The man stirred but did not wake. The elephant used his trunk to bring cool water from a nearby stream, sprinkling it gently over the man's wound. The forest watched in silence as the great creature cared for the small one. When morning came, the men awoke and found the wound clean. The bleeding stopped. They were astonished, though they could not explain what had happened. "The spirits of the forest have blessed us," one whispered. The leader only grunted. "Or maybe the elephant passed by. We'll find him soon enough." And so the hunt began. But the Gentle One did not flee. He wandered deeper into the forest, not from fear, but from understanding that his presence would draw harm if he stayed close. Days passed, and the hunters followed his tracks. Yet nature, in her kindness, conspired to protect him. Heavy rains fell, washing away his trail. Trees swayed and shed their leaves to cover his footprints. The animals guided him to secret paths known only to the older souls of the forest. He rested near a crystal-clear lake, feeling the pulse of life around him. The pain of being hunted weighed upon him, yet within that pain he found compassion. "They do not know," he thought. "They see beauty and wish to possess it. They fear what they do not understand." As he closed his eyes, he felt a strange peace. He had no anger toward the men. Instead, he wished them wisdom. In the quiet reflection of the lake, he saw his own image, strong yet gentle, powerful yet soft. It was then that he understood. True strength is not in the tusks or the might of his body, but in the calmness of his heart. For days, he stayed beside the lake, listening to the songs of frogs and the hum of life. When the rains ended, the hunters returned, tired and hungry. The forest had hidden the Gentle One well. Frustration grew among them. "He's a ghost," one muttered. The leader, however, refused to give up. "No creature hides forever," he said. But the Gentle One was not hiding. He was simply being. His days were filled with silence, his nights with starlight. Sometimes he dreamed of a world where no being feared another, where men walked through the forest not with weapons but with open hands. In his dream, he heard a voice, gentle and distant, like the breath of the earth itself. One day, they will remember. He did not know what it meant, but he carried it in his heart like a seed. The seed of understanding, watered by compassion, rooted in patience. Each sunrise that touched his skin reminded him that peace was his nature, and no act of violence could change that truth. The forest continued to live around him, unaware of the destiny that was slowly approaching. For in every story, light is tested by shadow, and the Gentle One's light was about to meet its test. Stop. The next morning dawned with a golden hush that draped itself over the forest like a silk veil. Mist floated between the trunks of ancient trees, and the dew sparkled upon the ferns like fragments of stars that had fallen in the night. The Gentle One rose slowly, his massive body moving with the grace of a drifting cloud. The forest awoke around him, small creatures stirring in the undergrowth, birds calling softly from the canopy. Everything in this sacred place moved to the rhythm of peace. Yet beneath the harmony lingered a faint echo of disturbance, like a shadow beneath the sunlight. The Gentle One felt it deep within, not as fear, but as a subtle sadness that rippled through the air. He had always trusted the forest to guide him, and now he trusted that same whisper to lead him wherever he needed to go. His great feet pressed softly into the damp earth as he began to walk toward a place he had not visited for many moons, the clearing, where the river curved into a gentle pool, a place known to the animals as the mirror of heaven. The water there was so clear that one could see the clouds reflected perfectly, and it was said that those who looked long enough would see not only the sky but their own souls staring back. When the Gentle One reached the pool, he lowered his head and drank slowly, feeling the cool liquid slide down his throat. As he lifted his gaze, he saw his reflection, calm and vast, and for a moment he thought he saw something else, within it a flicker of movement behind him, faint but real. He turned his head slightly and saw a man lying beneath a tree, shivering and pale. The scent of blood was faint but unmistakable. He recognized him as one of the humans from before, though his face was now gaunt with suffering. The man's leg was twisted unnaturally, his skin bruised and marked by thorns. The Gentle One stood still, listening to the faint sound of the man's breathing. There was no malice in the air, only pain. Slowly, the elephant approached. The man stirred weakly, his eyes opening in terror at the sight of the enormous creature looming above him. He tried to crawl backward, but his strength failed him. "Please," he whispered, his voice barely a breath, "don't harm me." The Gentle One lowered his trunk gently, touching the man's shoulder with a tenderness that silenced his fear. The man froze, tears welling in his eyes, not from pain, but from something he could not name, a sense of grace. The elephant turned toward the stream, filled his trunk with water, and sprayed it gently over the man's leg, cleaning the wound. Then he gathered leaves with his trunk, pressing them carefully over the cut as though guided by ancient memory. The forest seemed to watch in reverent silence. For the first time in his life, the man felt utterly small, not in the way of weakness, but in the way of humility. The creature he had once sought to capture was saving his life. Time lost its meaning in that clearing. The sun climbed higher, warming the air, and the man's shivering eased. When he tried to speak, no words came, only gratitude. The Gentle One stood beside him, guarding him like a silent guardian of the earth. At night, the man drifted in and out of sleep, waking sometimes to see the enormous shadow beside him, steady and unmoving, as if the elephant himself were keeping watch over his dreams. In the man's heart, something shifted. He remembered the stories told in the village, tales of great beasts, of tusks worth fortunes, of hunts that brought fame. But those stories had never spoken of eyes like this size, that carried the calm of 1,000 lifetimes. eyes that forgave without being asked. As dawn broke, the man found his strength returning. He sat up slowly, his hand trembling as he reached out toward the elephant. The gentle one did not move away. Their worlds met in that quiet space between fear and trust. "You saved me," the man whispered, his voice breaking. "Why?" The elephant's gaze held no answer in words, only a stillness that spoke of something larger than language. For in that moment, compassion itself was the answer. When the man finally stood, leaning on a broken branch as a crutch, he looked at the elephant one last time and said softly, "I will remember this." The gentle one watched him go, limping through the forest, disappearing into the distance. But even as he left, a small ache lingered in the elephant's chest, not of loss, but of hope. Hope that the kindness given would ripple beyond what he could see. Days passed. Rain came and went. The forest returned to its gentle rhythm, but the human world was not so easily changed. The man returned to his village, where his companions awaited, surprised to see him alive. They gathered around him, asking what had happened, and he told them of the creature who had saved his life. Some laughed, saying he had dreamed it in fever. Others listened but did not believe. Only the leader, the one with restless eyes, leaned closer and said, "You saw him, the white-tusked elephant." The man nodded slowly. "He is no beast to hunt," he said. "He is sacred. His eyes are wiser than any man's. To harm him would be a sin. But greed does not yield easily to truth." The leader's eyes gleamed. "Then he exists," he murmured. "We'll find him. Do you know where he was?" The man's face fell. "I will not tell you." The leader smiled coldly. "Then others will. His tracks can't vanish forever." That night, while the village slept, the man who had been saved sat outside his hut, staring into the darkness. The memory of the elephant haunted him, the warmth of his breath, the gentleness of his trunk, the peace that radiated from his being. It was as if the forest itself had touched his soul through that creature. He knew the others would hunt again. He knew greed was louder than wisdom. He pressed his hands together and whispered a prayer into the night. "May you be safe, gentle one. May the forest hide you." The next day, the hunters returned to the woods, their weapons glinting under the morning sun. The man did not go with them, but his heart followed their footsteps, heavy with dread. Deep within the forest, the gentle one sensed movement once again. The same vibration of disturbance trembled through the roots of the trees. He stood still by the river, the reflection of the sky shimmering round him. He knew the men had returned, yet he did not flee. Instead, he turned toward the heart of the forest, toward the sacred grove where the oldest tree grew, a massive being, whose trunk twisted toward the heavens like a prayer carved in wood. The grove was a place of stillness, where even time seemed to pause. He entered slowly, feeling the earth's pulse beneath him. As he reached the center, a memory rose in his mind, a vision he could not explain. He saw a golden figure seated beneath a tree, serene and radiant, eyes closed in deep compassion. The gentle one did not know the name of the figure, but his heart recognized the energy. It was the same stillness that lived within him, the same essence of peace he had always carried. He lowered his trunk to the earth in silent reverence, feeling that invisible presence flow through him. Far away, the hunters were closing in, unaware that they were nearing not just a creature, but a living lesson. The forest, sensing danger, began to change. Birds flew higher, monkeys called warnings through the trees, and the wind shifted, carrying whispers through the leaves like a chant. The Gentle One stood at the center of it all, unmoving, like the calm within a storm. He understood that no being escapes its fate, and yet he also knew that even fate can be met with compassion. He lifted his head toward the rising sun, and the light caught his tusks, turning them into two beams of ivory fire. The moment was sacred, though none but the forest witnessed it. The hunters were still far, yet already bound by the karma they were weaving. The man who had been saved felt it too. From his village, he heard the cry of birds and felt a cold wind brush his face. His heart sank. He whispered again into the silence, "Forgive them, Gentle One. They know not what they do." And somewhere deep in the forest, the Gentle One paused, as if he had heard. Morning came with the soft hum of insects and the slow rise of light spilling across the treetops, touching every leaf and branch like a blessing. The forest was alive, yet beneath its rhythm ran a quiet tension, invisible but steady, like a current beneath calm water. The Gentle One moved slowly through the mist, his ears flicking as he listened to the sounds around him. Each note of birdsong, each rustle of leaves spoke to him of life continuing in its endless dance. Yet he felt the difference, the imbalance that had entered this sacred place. Somewhere beyond the hills, human voices were breaking the harmony. He had known peace all his life, and even now he did not fear what might come, for fear was not part of his nature. Instead, he felt a deep compassion for the beings who could not yet see that harm to another was harm to themselves. He walked toward a grove of bamboo where the air was cool and fragrant, a place where he often came to rest. As he stepped through, a small monkey chattered from above, warning him of something unseen. The Gentle One raised his trunk, feeling the air, catching the scent of fire smoke carried on the wind. It was faint, but real. The hunters had drawn nearer. He could sense the vibration of their steps, even from afar, a pulse of disruption that traveled through the ground itself. Yet he did not turn away. Instead, he continued walking. The rhythm of his steps, like a prayer, repeated silently to the earth. May peace remain, may harm cease, may wisdom awaken. The path he took led him to a clearing where the grass grew tall and golden. He remembered this place. Once, long ago, he had come here to play when he was young, splashing in a small pool that had since dried to cracked earth. He remembered the warmth of the sun and the laughter of the smaller elephants that had once been his companions. They were gone now, taken by hunters or by time, and he had remained the last of his herd. For a moment, his great heart ached with the weight of memory. Loneliness, though familiar, still carried its sting. But he had learned that solitude was not emptiness, was a space wide enough for understanding to grow. He lifted his trunk and let out a low, rumbling sound that rolled across the valley like thunder softened by sorrow. It was not a cry for help, but a call of remembrance. A sound that spoke to the forest of everything that had been lost and everything that still endured. Far away, the hunters heard it. They froze, eyes wide, hearts racing. "He's close," one whispered. Their leader smiled. "Good, the gods themselves are guiding us." But the man who had once been saved by the elephant was also in the forest that day. He had followed them, unseen, hoping somehow to stop what was coming. Each step he took filled him with dread, for he knew that greed did not listen to reason. The forest seemed darker now, its silence heavy, as if it mourned what was about to unfold. He watched from behind a fallen tree as the hunters moved, their weapons gleaming in the filtered light. He wanted to shout, to tell them to turn back, but fear gripped his throat. He could only pray. The Gentle One reached the edge of the clearing just as the sun broke through the clouds, bathing him in light. For a brief moment, the world seemed to pause. Even the birds stopped singing. He lifted his trunk toward the sky, feeling the warmth upon his skin. It was as if the universe itself breathed with him. But then, from the shadows, came the sound of metal striking stone, the unmistakable clatter of weapons being prepared. The Gentle One turned his head slowly, his calm eyes meeting the shapes emerging from the forest edge. He did not move, did not flee. The hunters stepped forward, their faces lit with awe and greed as they beheld the creature before them. His tusks were long and curved, gleaming like moonlight even in the day. His skin bore the dust of age and the wisdom of countless years. He was magnificent, a living monument to the serenity of nature. "We found him," the leader breathed. "The white tusks of the east. The king will reward us beyond measure." The others nodded, though none spoke loudly, for something in the air pressed against their voices a sacred stillness they could not name. One of them raised his weapon, his hands trembling. The man who had been saved could no longer stay silent. He stepped from his hiding place and cried, "Stop! You fools, don't you see? He saved me. He is no beast, he's but..." Before he could finish, the leader's hand shot up, signaling silence. "You should have stayed in your village," he hissed. "You've lost your courage." The man's voice broke. "No, I've found my heart. You think you'll gain gold, but you'll only earn sorrow." The leader ignored him and took aim. The Gentle One stood still, watching the scene unfold, his eyes filled not with fear but with a deep, boundless compassion. In that instant, as the arrow was released, time seemed to slow. The forest inhaled sharply, leaves trembling, air thickening with sorrow. The arrow struck not deep, but enough to wound. The Gentle One let out a soft, low cry, a sound of both pain and forgiveness intertwined. The echo of it spread far and wide, reaching even the birds high in the canopy, who took flight in panic. The man who had been saved fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. The hunters hesitated. Something in that sound pierced their hearts, though they did not understand why. It was as if the earth itself mourned. The leader, shaking, shouted, "Finish it, before he charges." But the Gentle One did not move to attack. He simply stood, the wound bleeding softly, his breath coming slow and steady. He turned his gaze toward them, and in those ancient eyes was a depth they could not bear. It was not anger, it was sorrow for their ignorance, for the blindness that chained them. One of the younger hunters dropped his weapon, his hands trembling. "I can't," he whispered. "This isn't right." The leader snarled and raised his spear, but before he could throw it, the man who had been saved leapt forward, grabbing his arm. "Enough," he shouted. They struggled, the spear falling to the ground. In that moment of chaos, the Gentle One took a step back, then another, retreating toward the trees. His strength was fading, but his spirit remained unbroken. The forest seemed to open before him, branches bending aside as though guiding him away. Blood marked his trail, bright against the green, but still he walked. The hunters, breathless and shaken, watched him go. The leader cursed and pushed the man aside, snarling, "You've cost us everything." The man looked up, his face streaked with tears. "No," he said softly. "He's given us a chance to remember who we are." The hunters said nothing. None followed. The forest swallowed the Gentle One's shape until he was only a shadow among the trees. Hours passed. Rain began to fall, washing away the blood, cooling the earth. The man who had been saved stood alone, feeling the weight of silence press against his heart. He turned toward the deeper forest, following the faint trail, driven by a need he could not explain. The deeper he went, the quieter it became, until even the rain seemed to whisper rather than fall. Finally, he reached a small hill where the trees parted, revealing a wide meadow bathed in soft light. There, at its center, stood the Gentle One. His body swayed slightly, his breath shallow, but his eyes were calm. The man approached slowly, tears falling freely now. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I tried to stop them. I tried." The Gentle One lowered his trunk, brushing it lightly against the man's chest. A gesture of forgiveness so pure it broke whatever walls remained in the man's heart. The forest watched as they stood together, man and beast, bound not by fear but by compassion. Above them, the clouds parted, and a beam of sunlight fell upon them like a blessing. The man felt something awaken inside him, a peace deeper than sorrow, a knowing that love could exist even where pain had lived. The Gentle One took one more slow breath, then turned his gaze toward the horizon. Somewhere beyond the trees, the call of a distant bird rose, clear and haunting. He followed the sound with his eyes, as if recognizing an old friend. Then, slowly, he knelt upon the grass, his massive body sinking into the earth's embrace. The man fell to his knees beside him, clutching the air, whispering prayers he did not know. The Gentle One's eyes fluttered closed, his breath slowing, until it was no more than a sigh blending into the wind. But before the last breath left him, his trunk moved once more, touching the man's shoulder, a final blessing. The forest exhaled, and the rain began again, soft as tears. The man stayed there until nightfall, and when he finally rose, the stars had filled the sky. He looked once more at the great being who had shown him the face of true compassion, and he bowed deeply. "May your spirit be free," he said. "May your kindness live in us." The forest carried his words away, weaving them into its endless song. A song that would echo long after both man and elephant had become dust beneath the same gentle rain. Night fell softly upon the forest, and a silver mist rolled through the trees as if the heavens themselves had descended to mourn. The stars shimmered faintly above the canopy, their reflections caught in the pools left by the rain, and the air carried the scent of wet earth and fallen leaves. The man remained beside the body of the Gentle One long after darkness had consumed the world. He could not bring himself to leave. The silence pressed heavy upon his chest, filled with the echoes of the elephant's last breath. He remembered the warmth of that final touch, the way the trunk had rested upon his shoulder like a benediction, and he felt as though he had witnessed something sacred beyond words. When the moon rose higher, its pale light revealed the still form of the elephant bathed in a soft glow, almost as if he were not gone but only sleeping. The man whispered softly, "You are part of the earth now, old friend. The forest will remember you." He gathered branches and leaves, covering the Gentle One's body so that the forest might reclaim him in peace. Every movement was done with reverence, for he understood that this was no mere creature but a being of great spirit whose heart had held the essence of the Dharma, itself compassion without condition, forgiveness without end. When dawn came, the forest stirred gently as if awakening from a deep dream. Birds began to sing again, though their songs carried a note of sorrow. The man rose, weary and trembling, and began his walk back toward the village. Each step felt heavier than the last, for he carried not only grief but the weight of understanding. He had seen what few men had ever seen, the purity of a being untouched by anger, the power of kindness that endured even in pain. The forest whispered around him as he walked, leaves brushing against his shoulders as though to comfort him. He looked up once to the sky and thought he saw, for the briefest moment, a great white shape moving among the clouds, vast and radiant. It felt like a promise, though he did not yet know what it meant. By the time he reached the edge of the forest, the sun had risen fully, and the world beyond seemed strangely loud and empty. The village appeared the same as it always had, smoke rising from cooking fires, children playing in the dirt, merchants shouting about their goods, but something inside him had changed so deeply that nothing looked familiar anymore. When the people saw him return, they gathered around, asking what had happened. Their faces were curious, expectant, even fearful. The leader of the hunters stood apart, his expression dark and restless. "Well," he demanded, "did you bury your god beast?" The man looked at him, his eyes calm but filled with something the others could not name. "He was no beast," he said softly. "He was the purest being I have ever known." The leader scoffed, but there was unease in his voice. "And what did your pure being do when he was struck? Did he fight? Did he rage?" The man shook his head. He forgave. Even at the end, he forgave. A murmur spread through the crowd. Some looked ashamed. Others laughed nervously, trying to dismiss what they did not understand. But the man continued, his voice steady. "He showed me what true strength is. It is not in the tusks or the weapons we carry, it is in the heart that can love even when the world is cruel." The leader turned away, muttering something about fools and spirits. Yet that night, when he sat alone in his hut, the memory of the elephant's eyes returned to him. He had seen them too, just before the arrow flew, as that had looked into him, not with fear or hatred, but with a calm so deep it felt like standing before the ocean. He could not forget it. He drank to drive it away, but the memory remained, haunting him. Days passed, and strange things began to happen in the village. The forest, once a source of endless bounty, grew quiet. The hunters found fewer animals. The trees seemed to close their branches, and the rivers changed their course as though avoiding human touch. The villagers whispered that the spirit of the Gentle One had risen and was watching. Some said they heard his steps in the distance on nights when the wind howled, slow and steady like thunder rolling beneath the earth. Fear crept into the hearts of those who had once mocked the story. The man who had been saved withdrew from the others, spending his days near the edge of the forest, leaving offerings of fruit and flowers where the trees began to thicken. He spoke little, but his eyes were clear and peaceful. Those who passed him sometimes heard him whisper, "May we learn before it is too late." One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the leader of the hunters approached him. His face was pale, his hands trembling. "I saw him," he said in a voice barely above a whisper. "In my dreams, he came to me. He stood in the clearing just as he did before. His wound was gone, but his eyes, they looked at me as if he could see everything I've ever done." The man looked at him calmly. "What did he say?" The leader swallowed hard. "Nothing. But I heard something, not in words, something like forgiveness." "Why would he forgive me?" The man placed a hand on his shoulder. "Because that is who he was. His compassion is greater than our understanding. But his forgiveness is not freedom, it is a call to change." The leader lowered his head, unable to meet his gaze. "I cannot sleep. Every sound in the night feels like his breath beside me." The man sighed softly, "Then listen to it. Let it teach you." The leader said nothing more, but when dawn came, he gathered his men and went to the forest. No one saw them again. Some said they went to seek the elephant's resting place. Others believed they entered the forest to offer their repentance. Whatever truth there was, only the trees knew, and they kept their silence. Seasons changed. The rains returned, washing the land clean. The forest flourished once more, green and alive, its rivers singing louder than ever. In time, the village forgot its fear, though the story of the Gentle One lingered like perfume in the air, passed down from one generation to the next. Children grew up hearing about the great elephant who forgave those who harmed him, about the man he saved, and about the mysterious peace that settled over the forest ever since. The man himself grew old, his hair turning white as the moonlight. He lived simply, tending a small garden near the forest's edge. Sometimes he would sit beneath the trees at dusk, eyes closed, listening to the wind. On one such evening, as the light faded and fireflies began their dance, he heard a sound that made his heart still a deep, gentle rumble, faint but unmistakable. He opened his eyes and saw, just beyond the trees, a shape moving through the mist. For a moment, he thought it was his imagination. But then the shape grew clearer, the outline of a great elephant, white as starlight, its eyes calm and kind. The old man smiled, tears filling his eyes. "You kept your promise," he whispered. The elephant raised its trunk as if in greeting, then slowly faded into the light of the moon until nothing remained but the sound of leaves rustling and the steady rhythm of peace. That night, the old man dreamed of a vast plain where countless beings walked together, elephants, deer, birds, humans, all moving in harmony. In the center of it all stood the Gentle One, radiant and whole, his presence filling the air with warmth. The man approached and knelt before him. "What should I tell them?" he asked softly. The elephant's voice came not as sound but as feeling, a pulse of love that filled his heart. "Tell them kindness is the only path that leads home." When he awoke, dawn was breaking. He rose slowly, his body frail but his spirit light. He walked to the forest one last time, his feet sinking into the soft moss, his hand brushing the trunks of familiar trees. He reached the place where he had first met the Gentle One so many years ago, and there he sat, closing his eyes. The forest was alive with morning song, and as he took his final breath, the wind stirred gently, carrying the scent of rain and blossoms. Some say that when he passed, a new tree sprouted from the earth beside him, its bark pale and smooth, its leaves shimmering like silver. The villagers came to see it and found, carved naturally into its trunk, the faint shape of an elephant's head. They called it the Tree of Peace. From that day forward, no one hunted in that forest again. Travelers who passed through spoke of a strange serenity that seemed to hang in the air, a quiet presence that calmed even the most troubled heart. And on nights when the moon was full, some swore they could hear the soft rumble of an elephant in the distance, walking through the mist, watching over the world with eyes that held no anger, only endless compassion. Years passed, and time began to soften the memory of the Gentle One into legend. The villagers grew, the children of those who had once feared the forest became farmers and herders, and the world moved forward as if the great elephant had become only a whisper of the past. Yet the forest never forgot. The air there still carried a sacred stillness, and every living creature seemed to move in quiet harmony, as though obeying a law written not in words but in love. The Tree of Peace grew tall at the forest's edge, its pale bark gleaming like moonlight even under the brightest sun, and those who rested beneath it spoke of feeling their hearts lighten, their burdens ease, and their anger fade. Some said that the spirit of the Gentle One lingered there, watching over the world, his compassion woven into the roots of the earth. On a morning soaked in gold, a group of travelers arrived at the village. They wore robes of saffron and carried nothing but bowls and walking sticks. They were monks, moving from place to place, spreading teachings of compassion and mindfulness. The villagers greeted them with respect and offered them food and shelter. Among them was a young novice with eyes as calm as a still lake, who listened more than he spoke. When he saw the great tree at the edge of the forest, he felt something stir within him, a deep recognition, as though the tree were whispering an ancient truth. After the meal, he approached the oldest villager, a woman with hair like snow who sat weaving mats by her door. "Grandmother," he asked softly, "what is that tree?" The woman looked up, her wrinkled face lighting with memory. "Ah, that one. They say it grew from the place where a great elephant lay down to rest. He was the gentlest being this land has ever known." The novice listened intently, his hands folded. "Tell me his story." And so the woman began to speak, her voice carrying the rhythm of time. She told of the hunts, of the man who was saved, of the forgiveness that melted cruelty, and of how the forest changed forever after the Gentle One's passing. As she spoke, the novice closed his eyes, feeling each word enter him like a seed taking root. When she finished, she said, "That is why we do not hunt here anymore. The forest is sacred now. The monks say that when one creature's heart becomes pure, even the earth itself remembers." The novice bowed deeply and whispered, "Indeed, grandmother. Compassion never dies." That night, as the moon rose and silence blanketed the land, the novice walked to the tree of peace and sat beneath it in meditation. The air was cool, scented with night jasmine. Crickets sang softly, and a breeze moved through the branches, carrying the gentle creak of wood like a lullaby. The novice closed his eyes and let his breath flow in and out, slow and steady. Soon, the world around him seemed to fade, and he entered a state of deep stillness. In that silence, he felt something vast and tender a presence, neither seen nor heard, but felt through the quiet pulse of the earth beneath him. A vision bloomed within his mind. He saw the forest as it had been long ago, vibrant and untouched. He saw the Gentle One walking through the mist, his steps silent, his heart glowing with light. The novice bowed inwardly, recognizing this being as a manifestation of the teachings he had studied: boundless compassion, unwavering patience, and fearless love. The Gentle One turned to him, and though his lips did not move, the novice heard his voice clearly within his heart. "Child of the path, the forest remembers kindness as the soul remembers truth. What was once gentle remains eternal. Tell them to remember." The novice's breath caught. "Tell them what, Great One?" The voice was soft as falling rain. "Tell them that compassion is the bridge between all beings. Tell them that to harm another is to wound the heart of the world. Tell them that peace cannot be taken, it can only be forgotten." The vision began to fade, but warmth lingered in the novice's chest, spreading outward until he felt as if the whole forest breathed with him. When he opened his eyes, tears streamed down his face, though he felt no sadness, only a profound peace that words could never hold. He pressed his forehead to the earth and whispered, "I will remember." At dawn, he returned to the village and told the elder monk what he had seen. The elder listened quietly, his expression serene. When the novice finished, the old monk smiled faintly. "What you saw is truth made visible. The Gentle One was no ordinary being. In every age, Compassion takes form so that the blind may see it and the lost may find their way home. This elephant carried the light of the Dharma within him. His forgiveness awakened the forest, and now his memory has awakened you. The novice nodded slowly. What shall I do, Master? Carry his story. Speak it softly, not as a tale of sorrow, but as a reminder of love that endures beyond death. Wherever you go, tell of the Gentle One, for every heart that hears will remember something ancient within itself. And so the novice began his journey. For many years, he walked from village to village, telling the story beneath starlit skies and by the glow of temple lamps. People listened, and something in their eyes softened. Some wept, others smiled faintly, as though recognizing a long-lost truth. The story spread across mountains and rivers, carried by word of mouth and quiet reverence. It changed those who heard it, not through fear or command, but through the quiet power of tenderness. In distant lands, where forests whispered different names, other elephants roamed freely and were treated with respect. Hunters laid down their spears, merchants gave food to monks, and children began to leave offerings of flowers beneath trees, whispering prayers of gratitude. The world, though still imperfect, began to turn a little more gently. One evening, many years later, the novice, now an old monk himself, returned to the forest of his youth. The tree of peace still stood, taller than ever, its branches spreading like arms that embraced the sky. The monk sat beneath it and closed his eyes. The years had slowed his body but sharpened his spirit. He could feel the pulse of life beneath him, steady and eternal. The forest breathed, as it always had. He whispered softly, "Gentle One, I have done as you asked. I have told them to remember." The wind stirred, and the leaves above him rustled like laughter. A single petal fell, landing upon his knee. He smiled. "You are still here." As the night deepened, he felt his breath merge with the rhythm of the forest, slow and infinite. In that moment, the boundary between himself and the world dissolved. He was the tree, the wind, the earth, the memory of kindness itself. He knew that death was not an end, but a returning, and he welcomed it as gently as one welcomes sleep. In the years that followed, travelers continued to visit the Tree of Peace. They came seeking healing, wisdom, or simply a place to rest. Some claimed that when they sat in silence long enough, they could feel the faint vibration of a heartbeat within the ground. Others said they heard a low, rumbling sound like the purr of the earth itself. The monks who tended the nearby monastery never denied these stories, for they too had felt it, the unseen presence that moved through the roots. The same energy that had once filled the heart of the Gentle One. And so the legend endured. It was told not as myth, but as truth whispered between breaths, carried in dreams, remembered in quiet moments when the world grew still. Generations later, a child sat beneath the tree with his mother and asked, "Do you think the elephant still walks among us?" The mother smiled softly, brushing a leaf from his hair. "Perhaps not in the way we see, but whenever you choose kindness, whenever you forgive, he walks again through you." The child nodded, his eyes wide, and in that small heart, the spirit of the Gentle One awoke once more. For compassion, once born, never dies. It lives in every gentle act, in every breath of forgiveness, in every heart brave enough to remain kind in a world that forgets how. And so the story came full circle. The forest stood eternal, the Tree of Peace shining under the moon. And somewhere in the stillness between worlds, the Gentle One watched with a heart that never ceased to love. The wind whispered softly through the tall grass as twilight descended once more upon the forest that had been home to the Gentle One. The trees swayed in rhythm with the earth's unseen breath, and the scent of damp moss filled the air like a sacred perfume. The years had long since blurred the line between story and memory, and yet, for those who came seeking peace beneath the great tree of peace, it was as though time itself had bowed in reverence to what had once lived there. Beneath its vast branches, travelers still knelt, monks still meditated, and tired souls still closed their eyes to find rest. The world beyond had changed. Villages had grown into towns. The echo of carts replaced the quiet footfalls of hunters, but the forest remained untouched, a sanctuary for those who still believed in kindness. One evening, as the sun sank behind the mountains and painted the sky with colors of rose and amber, a young woman arrived at the forest's edge. Her clothes were dusty from travel, and her eyes carried the weight of grief. She was not from the nearby villages. Her accent was strange, her footsteps hesitant, as if she was searching for something she did not quite understand. When she reached the great tree, she fell to her knees and pressed her forehead against its trunk, whispering, "Please help me find peace." The bark was warm beneath her skin, alive somehow, as though listening. She closed her eyes, and tears fell silently onto the roots. In the quiet that followed, she began to feel the faintest vibration through the earth, a rhythm steady and calm, like the heartbeat of something vast and eternal. The air around her thickened with stillness, and then she heard it, a deep, low rumble that seemed to rise from the soil itself, soft and melodic, not frightening but full of love. She looked up, startled, but there was nothing to see except the swaying branches and the silver moon rising through their leaves. Yet in that moment, she felt a strange calm enter her, the first she had known in years. Her pain did not vanish, but it softened, as though the forest had wrapped its arms around her. She did not know that she had touched the spirit of the Gentle One. That night, she stayed beneath the tree, curling up against its roots. As she drifted towards sleep, she dreamed. In her dream, she stood in the middle of a vast plain filled with light. The air shimmered, and in the distance, a great elephant walked toward her. His steps were slow and deliberate, his eyes gentle, his form surrounded by a soft radiance that seemed both earthly and divine. She felt no fear. When he stopped before her, she bowed instinctively, though she did not know why. The elephant lowered his head and spoke not with words, but through feeling, through warmth that entered her heart and filled her with understanding. "You are not alone," the voice within her said. "Your pain is not yours alone to carry. When you breathe with all life. When you love, you heal the world." The woman wept, and as she did, the light around them grew brighter until she could see nothing but gold. When she woke, dawn had come, and the world was new again. Birds sang from the branches above, and the forest glittered with dew. She sat for a long time beneath the tree, her face lifted toward the light. For the first time since her husband's passing, she felt peace. She gathered her things, bowed to the tree, and whispered, "Thank you." Then she left, her heart lighter, her spirit renewed. Word of her experience spread quickly among nearby villages. People spoke of her healing, of how she had gone to the forest broken and returned whole. More travelers came, some seeking answers, others seeking silence. And all who entered the forest felt something indescribably gentleness that seemed to flow from the very soil. The monks who tended the nearby monastery welcomed them all, guiding them to meditate beneath the great tree and listen to the stillness. Many reported feeling the same heartbeat in the ground, the same faint hum that seemed to whisper words of compassion. The monks said only, "The gentle one still walks here, though not as flesh. His spirit breathes through all that lives." Among the monks was a young boy named Ananda, curious and full of questions. Every evening he would sit beside the elder and ask, "Master, is it true that the gentle one was once like us? Did he think and feel and dream?" The elder smiled softly, his eyes glinting in the candlelight. "Yes, my child. He felt joy and sorrow, just as we do. But he learned to turn both into love. That is what made him gentle." "But how can one love those who cause pain?" the boy asked. "Isn't that impossible?" The elder looked out toward the dark forest, where fireflies drifted like tiny stars. "Love that depends on kindness is small," he said quietly. "The love that forgives cruelty, that is the love that frees the heart." The boy thought long about those words. And that night, as he lay upon his mat, he dreamed of the gentle one walking through the forest, his great shadow stretching across the moonlit ground. When he awoke, he carried the dream in his heart like a secret flame. Years passed, and Ananda grew into a wise monk. He spent most of his days teaching travelers and villagers who came seeking wisdom beneath the tree of peace. But unlike other teachers, he did not speak of scriptures or rituals. Instead, he told stories softly, slowly, in a voice that soothed like rain. The story of the gentle one became his favorite. He told it not as a legend, but as a living truth. Each retelling slightly different, yet always the same at its core. Kindness endures beyond all things. Some nights, as he spoke, the wind would stir, and the branches of the tree would sway as if listening. The fireflies gathered around, and the listeners often swore they heard the faint rumble of an elephant's call in the distance. It was said that on those nights, even the hardest hearts began to soften. Ananda never claimed credit for this. He would only smile and say, "It is not my voice they hear, it is the forest remembering." His fame spread far beyond the forest, and people from distant lands came to listen. Among them were scholars who wanted to study the mystery, merchants who came for curiosity, and kings who sought wisdom. One such king, known for his restlessness, arrived one summer evening with a small entourage. He had heard of the monk who spoke of peace and of the tree that healed hearts. When he entered the forest, the noise of his soldiers seemed out of place, loud and discordant against the forest's stillness. The monk greeted him calmly, bowing with respect, but without fear. "Welcome, Your Majesty. What brings you here?" The king studied him curiously. "I've conquered nations and silenced my enemies," he said, "but I cannot conquer my own mind. I came to see if your stories can tame it." The monk nodded. "Then sit and listen not to me, but to the silence between the words." The king frowned, but did as he was told. Beneath the great tree, he sat among commoners and monks alike, his crown glinting faintly in the fading light. The monk began to speak, telling once more the tale of the gentle one. His voice was low and even, flowing like water over smooth stones. He spoke of the elephant's compassion, his forgiveness, his quiet strength. The king listened at first with skepticism, but as the story unfolded, something within him began to shift. He saw in his mind the image of the great elephant standing in the forest, wounded but calm, forgiving those who had harmed him. The king felt a strange warmth in his chest, something long forgotten. When the story ended, silence filled the air. The forest seemed to breathe again, and the king felt tears on his cheeks. "Why does this story move me so?" he whispered. Because it reminds you of what you already know, the monk replied gently. Power without compassion is emptiness. To forgive is not weakness. It is the highest form of strength. The king looked at him for a long time, then bowed his head. I have conquered everything but my own heart. Perhaps that is where my true kingdom lies. He left the forest the next morning, but his heart was no longer the same. From that day onward, he ruled with kindness, his realm flourishing in peace. Word spread of the wise king who had learned compassion beneath the tree of peace, and the legend of the gentle one grew even brighter. Generations passed, yet the story never faded. The forest continued to thrive, and the air there always carried a softness unlike anywhere else. Even the wildest creatures grew calm within its bounds. And when storms raged across the land, lightning never struck the great tree. It stood eternal, a living reminder that peace once walked the earth in the form of an elephant who forgave all harm. One night, as the moon rose high and bathed the forest in silver light, Ananda sat beneath the tree for the last time. His hair had turned white, his body frail, but his eyes glowed with serenity. He looked up at the branches swaying above and whispered, I am ready. A gentle breeze moved through the leaves, and he felt it the same presence that had filled him as a boy, the same peace that had comforted kings and healed strangers. He closed his eyes, and for a brief moment, he saw the gentle one once more walking through the mist, his eyes filled with endless love. The monk smiled, exhaled softly, and was gone, his breath blending into the eternal rhythm of the forest. And somewhere, far away but near enough to be felt, the earth rumbled softly, as if a great heart had sighed in contentment. The story continued, not in words, but in every act of kindness that followed. In every soul who chose love over hate, in every child who listened to the wind and believed that somewhere, deep in the world's quiet heart, the gentle one still walked. The centuries drifted by like clouds, silent and unhurried, and the world around the forest changed in ways that neither the trees nor the wind could have imagined. Roads were built where once only animal trails wound through the undergrowth, and the hum of carriages, then machines, replaced the soft footsteps of travelers who had come seeking the tree of peace. Villages became towns, and towns grew into cities, their noise echoing faintly at the edge of the forest like a distant, restless heartbeat. Yet even as the world turned to iron and smoke, the forest remained untouched, as if protected by an unseen hand. The tree of peace still stood tall and unbroken, its pale trunk glowing faintly even on the darkest nights. Many who passed by felt something stir within them, though they did not know why. A sudden quiet in their thoughts, a softening in their hearts, as if an invisible presence whispered, "Be still." And so the legend endured even as faith in old stories faded from human lips. In one of the nearby towns, there lived a young man named Lian, who worked as a woodcutter. He was strong but restless, quick to anger, and weary of the endless struggle to survive. His father had once told him of the gentle one, the elephant whose forgiveness had changed the forest, but Lian had long dismissed it as a tale for children. If compassion fed the hungry, he would say bitterly, there would be no poor left in the world. His heart had hardened from years of loss, his mother taken by illness, his father by an accident in the wood sand, though he worked each day, cutting timber for the markets. He felt no peace, only the dull ache of existence. One day, desperate for money, he followed a group of merchants into the forest. They spoke of rare trees deep within the sacred grove, whose wood, they said, was smoother and stronger than any other. Lian hesitated, for he knew it was forbidden to cut within that part of the forest, but greed and desperation dulled his fear. They entered at dawn, their axes gleaming, their voices loud. The forest seemed to grow darker as they went, though the sky above was clear. Birds fell silent. The deeper they went, the heavier the air became, until even Lian began to feel uneasy. When they finally reached the clearing, the tree of peace towered above them, its silver bark glowing faintly in the morning light. "There," one of the merchants said, pointing. "That's the one. The heartwood will fetch a fortune." Lian felt a chill crawl down his spine. "We shouldn't," he murmured. "This tree belongs to the forest. It's sacred," the others laughed. "Sacred doesn't pay for bread." Before he could stop them, they raised their axes and struck. The sound echoed like thunder, rolling through the trees. The forest shuddered. The men swung again and again, until Lian could bear it no longer. He shouted, "Stop!" but his voice was drowned by the ringing of metal on wood. Then, without warning, the sky darkened. A wind rose from nowhere, fierce and sudden, whipping through the clearing with such force that it drove the men back. Their torches went out, and the air turned cold. The ground trembled. Lian fell to his knees as a deep sound rolled through the earth, a rumble like the breath of something ancient awakening. The merchants screamed and fled, dropping their tools, crashing through the undergrowth until their shouts faded into the distance. Lian remained frozen, staring at the great tree. Its bark shimmered, and the faint outline of an elephant seemed to move across its surface, its form vast and luminous. The air vibrated with power, yet it was not anger that filled it was sorrow. The sound that followed was low and resonant, like the hum of a great bell beneath the world. It filled Lian's chest, echoing through his bones until he thought his heart would break. He pressed his hands together and whispered, "Forgive us." The wind softened, the light dimmed, and slowly the forest stilled again. The image upon the tree faded, leaving only the shimmer of dew upon its bark. Lian remained kneeling, trembling and breathless. In that moment, something inside him cracked open the wall he had built to keep the world out. The bitterness that had replaced his faith. Tears streamed down his face as he bowed low to the earth. "I'm sorry," he whispered again. "I didn't understand." The forest seemed to breathe a sigh of release. When he finally rose, the sun was breaking through the clouds once more, and the clearing glowed with golden light. The broken tools lay scattered around him, but none dared to pick them up. Lian turned and walked back toward the village, his steps slow, his heart strangely light. In the days that followed, the merchants never returned. Those who had swung their axes that day fell ill with fevers that no healer could cure. Some said it was a curse. Others said it was their guilt consuming them. Lian, however, began to change. He gave up his trade as a woodcutter and went to live near the edge of the forest, building a small hut from fallen branches. Each day he brought offerings of fruit and flowers to the tree of peace, speaking softly to it as one might to a teacher or friend. Villagers began to notice the change in him, his anger gone, his words gentle, his eyes filled with calm. People who came to him with troubles found comfort simply sitting near him. When they asked what had happened in the forest, he would only say, "I met what I once denied. The gentle one still walks here." His story spread, and more people came, drawn by curiosity or hope. Some laughed, calling him a dreamer. Others knelt with tears in their eyes, feeling the same peace that had changed him. The elders of the village remembered the old tales and realized that what had once been myth had become real again. The forest began to thrive once more. Flowers bloomed where none had grown in years. Streams ran clear and bright, and the air seemed to hum with quiet joy. Even the animals grew bolder, venturing near the tree of peace without fear. At night, the villagers sometimes heard the distant rumble of an elephant, soft and rhythmic, moving through the mist. They no longer feared it. Instead, they bowed their heads and whispered prayers of gratitude. Lian continued to live by the forest until his hair turned grey and his hands trembled with age. He taught the children to bow before the tree, not in worship but in respect for all that lives. The gentle one is not gone, he would tell them. He lives wherever hearts choose kindness. One day, a storm swept across the land, fierce and unrelenting. Lightning split the sky, and thunder rolled like the roar of angry gods. The villagers feared for the tree of peace and ran to the edge of the forest, calling out Lian's name, but he was already there, standing beneath its branches, his robe whipped by wind, his face calm. "Go back," they shouted. "It's dangerous." But Lian shook his head. "The forest protected me once," he said. "Now I will stand with it." The storm raged on, tearing through the trees, yet when the lightning struck, it curved away from the great tree as though repelled by unseen power. The wind howled, rain fell in torrents, and through it all, Lian stood unmoving, his hands pressed to the trunk in silent prayer. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the storm ceased. The sky cleared, the air filled with the scent of new life, and a rainbow stretched across the heavens. When the villagers approached, they found Lian kneeling, his head bowed, his body still. He had passed peacefully, his face serene, a faint smile upon his lips. Around him, the ground was covered in petals white, fragrant and soft as breath. No one knew where they had come from, for no such flowers grew nearby. The villagers buried him at the base of the tree of peace, marking the spot with stones. They said that on quiet nights, if you listened closely, you could hear two heartbeats there, one of man, one of elephant beating in harmony beneath the earth. As generations turned once more, the world outside grew louder, but the forest remained a sanctuary. Pilgrims came from far lands to rest beneath its shade. Some spoke of visions, others of dreams, all carrying with them the same message, that love never dies, that forgiveness ripples outward forever. And though no living creature had seen the gentle one for centuries, his spirit was felt in every rustle of the leaves, in every breath of wind that passed through the tree of peace. And those who stayed long enough, those who sat in silence until the noise of their minds dissolved, would sometimes see, just for a moment, a great white elephant moving through the mist, his eyes gentle, his steps silent, carrying peace wherever he went. The years turned into centuries, and the forest that once stood at the heart of the old kingdom became a sanctuary, surrounded by a world that had forgotten how to listen. The hum of machines replaced the songs of birds in the nearby valleys, and towers of steel rose where rice once grew beneath the open sky. But deep within the last stretch of green, the tree of peace still stood, silent and unyielding, holding the memory of an age when compassion ruled more deeply than law. The people who lived in the city nearby had long stopped believing in legends. They passed stories down as fairy tales, told to children before sleep, but dismissed by adults as dreams from a simpler time. Yet even those who no longer believed still avoided cutting down the forest. There was something about it they could not explain, a quiet that lingered in the air, too deep, too alive, to disturb. The few who dared enter came back changed, some softer, some quieter, as though they had left part of their pain among the roots. One of these people was a young scholar named Mira. She worked at a university that studied the world's forgotten myths and ancient spiritual traditions. Her days were filled with books and her nights with research, yet her heart was restless. Though she wrote of peace and compassion, she felt none within herself. She lived surrounded by noise voices, schedules, screens, and yet she had never felt so alone. Her mother had died years ago, her father long gone, and she moved through life with the numb precision of someone who had forgotten how to feel. One day, while researching the oral histories of a remote region, she came across a recurring story of an elephant who had lived 1,000 lifetimes ago, whose forgiveness had changed the heart of a forest. The story appeared in records from different villages, in different languages, but the essence was always the same: a being of great gentleness who had died forgiving those who killed him, and whose spirit still lingered, guiding the world toward kindness. Myra was drawn to it in a way she couldn't explain. She found a map referencing the sacred grove of the Gentle One, a place thought to have vanished centuries earlier. Yet when she compared it to modern geography, she realized the coordinates matched a forest only a few hours from her city, the very forest her grandmother had once warned her not to enter. Some places are alive, her grandmother had said when Mira was a child. They remember. They see you. Mira smiled faintly at the memory. She packed her notebook, camera, and recorder and took the first train out of the city. By afternoon, she stood at the forest's edge, the air thick with the scent of rain and wildflowers. A sign at the entrance read, "Protected land, no logging, no development." She stepped past it, and at once the noise of the world faded. The forest greeted her with stillness so complete it felt like a living breath. She walked slowly, her boots sinking into soft earth, sunlight filtering through layers of green. As she moved deeper, the sense of separation she had always carried began to blur. The wind brushed against her cheek like a hand. The trees creaked softly, and birds followed her path, calling from unseen perches. After a while, she began to feel that she was not exploring the forest at all, it was the forest exploring her. Hours passed before she reached a clearing where a single massive tree stood, its bark pale and gleaming like polished ivory. It was far larger than any she had seen, its branches stretching toward the heavens in slow, graceful arcs. Something in her chest tightened. She knew without question that she had found the tree of peace. She set down her bag and stepped closer. The air was different here, cool and charged, as if filled with invisible music. She reached out a hand and touched the bark, warm, smooth, alive. A vibration hummed beneath her palm, faint but steady, like a heartbeat. She drew in a breath and whispered, "Gentle One." The forest seemed to exhale around her. A breeze stirred, leaves shivering, and she felt a sudden rush of emotion so deep that her knees gave way. She sank to the ground, tears spilling before she understood why. Her grief, her loneliness, her exhaustion, all that she had buried within herself, came rushing to the surface, raw and unstoppable. She pressed her forehead to the roots and sobbed, her cries echoing through the quiet grove. Yet, instead of despair, what followed was release. It was as if the earth itself absorbed her pain, cradled it, and transformed it into stillness. When she finally lifted her head, the world seemed softer, bathed in golden light. A voice, deep and calm, rose in her mind, not from outside, but from within. "Why do you cry, child of the world?" She froze, her heart pounding. The voice carried no edge, no sound, yet it filled every corner of her being. "Because I am tired," she whispered aloud. "Tired of pretending to understand life when I feel lost inside it. Tired of writing about compassion when I can't feel it for myself." The voice was silent for a long moment, then said, "The river does not question its flow, yet it nourishes all. You have forgotten how to flow. Who are you?" she asked, trembling. The air shimmered, and before her, the outline of an enormous shape began to take form, translucent, radiant, filled with soft white light. The shape of an elephant, vast and serene, eyes gentle as the moon. She gasped, but no fear rose within her. The being looked upon her with infinite tenderness. "I am what remains when love does not die," it said. "The forest remembers me, for I never left it. I am the gentle one." Mira's breath caught. "You're real," she whispered. "I thought you were a myth." "Everything that teaches love is real," the gentle one replied. "My body was lost, but compassion does not end with death. It lives wherever it is remembered." She stared at him, her tears falling again, though now they were quiet, peaceful. "Why me?" she asked. "Why show yourself now?" "Because you are like all who forget," the gentle one said. "You seek peace by running from pain, but peace is not the absence of suffering. It is the understanding that even suffering belongs. Sit, child, listen." She sat cross-legged at the base of the tree, and the vision grew brighter. The forest faded away until there was only light, vast and endless, and the gentle one standing before her. His voice was a melody that rose and fell like breath. "Long ago, I forgave those who harmed me, not because I was strong, but because I saw that they suffered more than I did. Their greed was a wound. Their ignorance was pain. When you see the pain beneath another's cruelty, anger dissolves, and love remains." Mira closed her eyes, feeling his words enter her like water soaking into dry earth. "But how can I love those who destroy?" she whispered. "The world has grown cruel." The gentle one lowered his great head. "Compassion does not mean approval. It means understanding. To see clearly is to love wisely. When you love wisely, even your actions become healing." "And what must I do?" she asked. "Remember," he said simply. "Remember who you are. You are not separate from the world you grieve. Every act of kindness heals what cruelty has broken. When one heart chooses peace, 1,000 others remember." The vision began to fade, but she felt no loss. The light sank into her skin until it became her own. The voice grew faint. "Go and remind them, as others reminded you. Tell the story. Let compassion walk again." When the light disappeared completely, Mira found herself alone in the grove. The sun had fallen low, and the forest shimmered in twilight. She sat still for a long time, her heart quiet, her mind clear. Then she rose, brushed the earth from her knees, and smiled for the first time in years. As she walked back through the forest, she felt the ground pulse beneath her feet, the same steady heartbeat she had felt before. It followed her all the way to the edge of the trees, then faded into the hum of the world. In the days that followed, Myra wrote not as a scholar, but as one who had been transformed. Her papers spoke of compassion as a living force, not a concept. She taught her students that peace was not an ideal, but a practice, that the smallest act of understanding could change the world. People listened. Some mocked her, but others wept as they heard her speak, for her words carried something ancient, something real. News spread of the forest and the mysterious energy that lingered there. Scientists came to measure it, monks came to meditate, and seekers came simply to feel. Each left changed in small, inexplicable ways. Some spoke of dreams filled with white elephants, others of voices in the wind whispering, "Remember." Decades passed. Myra grew old, her hair white, her steps slow, but her spirit radiant. One morning, she returned to the forest one last time. She walked without haste, her breath calm, her eyes bright with recognition. When she reached the tree of peace, she placed her hands upon its bark and whispered, "I told them." A breeze rose, carrying her words into the leaves, and the ground beneath her feet vibrated gently. She smiled. "I am ready to rest." She sat beneath the great tree, leaned her back against its trunk, and closed her eyes. The sun broke through the clouds, bathing her in golden light. When the monks found her later, she was still sitting upright, her face peaceful, her notebook beside her. On its final page were written 3 words: "Love never ends." That night, as the wind moved through the forest, villagers swore they heard the low rumble of an elephant echoing through the trees. It was not loud or frightening, but soft and steady, like the world itself breathing. And those who listened carefully said it carried words too gentle to be heard, yet too powerful to be forgotten. "I am still here." The night after Myra's passing was unlike any other. The forest lay beneath a blanket of mist, and the stars above shimmered faintly as though veiled by the breath of the earth. The air was thick with quiet, a silence so deep it seemed almost to listen. The monks who had tended the tree of peace gathered beneath its branches to perform a simple ceremony, not of mourning but of gratitude. They lit oiled lamps and placed them in a circle around the great roots, each flame swaying gently as if bowing to the unseen presence that filled the grove. No one spoke loudly, for every word felt sacred in that place. When dawn came, the forest stirred with a light unlike any they had seen before. Golden rays filtered through the mist, touching the bark of the ancient tree until it glowed softly, and from the heart of its trunk came a faint humalo, resonant vibration that filled the ground and the air and the space within their chests. The monks bowed their heads, understanding without needing to speak that the Gentle One had returned. Not in form, but in spirit, his compassion now woven inseparably into the breath of life itself. The forest was his body, the wind his voice, the silence his eternal meditation. From that day onward, those who entered the grove began to experience something profound. Some would burst into tears without knowing why. Others would fall into deep stillness, their thoughts dissolving like mist in sunlight. A few heard the sound of distant footsteps, heavy yet soft, echoing faintly through the trees. And though none ever saw him, all left with the same feeling, an overwhelming peace, as if their hearts had been bathed in light. The monks did not try to explain it. They simply said, "The Gentle One listens. The Gentle One remembers." As word spread, pilgrims from across the world came to visit the forest. They came from lands where faith had long turned cold, from cities where no one looked to the stars anymore, from lives burdened with noise and fear. Some came for healing, some for answers, but all left changed. A man who had lost his son found forgiveness in his heart. A woman consumed by hatred toward her enemies wept until her anger dissolved. Even skeptics, hardened by intellect, felt something stir within them that logic could not name. Scientists arrived with instruments to measure the vibrations of the ground, the energy of the trees, the chemical composition of the air, but none could capture what they felt. One researcher, after weeks of data, wrote in her report, "There is a frequency here that matches the rhythm of the human heartbeat." She did not add that, for the first time in her life, she had prayed. The government eventually declared the forest a world sanctuary, protected from any form of development. Temples were built at its border, not grand or golden, but simple, open structures made of wood and stone, designed for silence. The monks who lived there tended to visitors, but never preached. They only told stories of the gentle one, of the man he had saved, of the king who found compassion, of the monk who remembered, of Myra who carried the tale into the modern world. The story became a bridge across cultures, religions, and generations, translated into dozens of tongues, yet always carrying the same pulse: compassion beyond harm. But time, ever flowing, does not stop even for sacredness. Centuries later, when the world entered an age of glass and light, when cities reached the clouds and people spoke more to machines than to each other, the forest remained a green heart beating at the edge of a restless planet. Many forgot its location, though its name lingered like a lullaby told to children at bedtime. Some dismissed it as a myth, a metaphor for something humanity had lost. But myths, like seeds, lie dormant until the season of remembering returns. In that age lived a boy named Kai, born into a world that measured worth in speed and silence in scarcity. He had grown up in a city that never slept, where light drowned the stars and screens replaced faces. His mother had told him bedtime stories of the gentle one, the great elephant of compassion who forgave even those who destroyed him. As a child, Kai had loved those stories, but as he grew older, they faded into dreams. When his mother fell ill and passed away, he found her old journal, filled with sketches of trees and notes about a journey. She had planned but never taken a pilgrimage to the forest of the gentle one. Something in those pages called to him, a whisper buried beneath the ink. One night, when the city's lights seemed to choke the sky, he made a choice without understanding why. He packed a small bag, left a note on his desk, and boarded a train heading east. The journey took him across plains and rivers, through villages that had long stopped appearing on maps. The air grew cleaner, the noise faded, and the rhythm of the earth returned to his awareness. After days of travel, he reached the edge of a vast green expanse. The locals called it the Old Forest, though none dared enter after sunset. When he asked about the Tree of Peace, an old woman smiled faintly and said, "If you walk long enough without speaking, it will find you." So he walked. He left behind the last road, the last sound of human life, and stepped into the quiet embrace of the trees. At first his thoughts followed him: memories, regrets, questions, but slowly they began to fade, softened by the song of cicadas and the sighing of the wind. The forest seemed alive, aware, ancient beyond measure. Hours passed, or maybe days' time, lost meaning beneath the canopy. Then, without warning, he entered a clearing, and there it was, the Tree of Peace, vast and luminous even in the fading light. It was more beautiful than any picture or story could have captured, its bark shimmering faintly, its roots thick and steady like the arms of the earth itself. Kai approached slowly, heart pounding. He reached out a trembling hand and laid it upon the trunk. Warmth flowed through him, instantly, not physical heat, but something deeper, like the warmth of recognition. He closed his eyes, and a voice rose within him, ancient and kind. "You came," he gasped, though no sound escaped his lips. "You know me." The voice was a soft thunder, both near and infinite. "I know all who remember." You are your mother's child. Her heart called you here. Kai felt tears sting his eyes. She wanted to come. She never made it. The forest sighed, and a faint light glowed through the bark, pulsing with the rhythm of breath. She has arrived through you. The boy fell to his knees, overcome. Why do you still care? He whispered. The world has forgotten you. People hurt each other, destroy what's sacred. Compassion feels impossible. The voice grew softer. Love is never wasted. When it is forgotten, it sleeps. When it is remembered, it wakes. The world has not lost compassion, it has only grown tired. Then how can we heal it? Kai asked. By remembering what it feels like to care, said the gentle one. Do not wait for peace to return. Become its echo. Every act of kindness ripples farther than you can see. Even now, you are part of the story that began long ago. The light brightened, and Kai felt the forest pulse with life. Images flooded his mind. The gentle elephant saving the wounded man, forgiving his hunters, blessing the king, inspiring the monk, guiding Myra, and now standing before him not as memory, but as living presence. The chain of compassion stretched unbroken across millennia, flowing from one heart to another like a river that never dries. Will you tell the story again? The gentle one asked. Kai bowed deeply. I will. Then go, said the voice, now fading. Go and remind them that love never dies, only waits to be remembered. When Kai opened his eyes, the clearing was empty. The light had faded, the forest silent except for the rustle of leaves. Yet something inside him burned quietly, steady and strong. He took his notebook from his bag and began to write, not research, not fiction, but truth. Words poured from him like rain, about the gentle one, the forest, the forgiveness that healed the world. When he finally left the grove, dawn was breaking. The first rays of sunlight touched his face, and for a moment, he thought he heard the soft rumble of footsteps behind him, a sound that made the earth itself hum. He turned, but there was nothing, only mist curling around the roots of the great tree. He smiled and whispered, "Thank you." Years later, Kai's writings spread across the world. His book, The Heart That Forgave, was translated into dozens of languages and read by millions. But unlike other spiritual works, it did not preach, it simply told a story. The story of a gentle elephant who loved beyond fear, and of those who remembered him. People who read it began to change. In cities, strangers helped one another. In offices, workers paused before speaking in anger. In prisons, inmates wept as they read aloud the passage where the gentle one forgave his hunters. Across the world, the story moved like light through cracks in stone, reaching hearts that had long been closed. And though few spoke of it openly, many began to dream the same dream of walking through a forest filled with mist, of a great elephant waiting beneath a glowing tree, of a voice that whispered, "Remember." No one could explain it, but the world grew softer. Compassion, once dismissed as weakness, became a strength again. People began planting trees in cities, naming them after the gentle one. And though the original forest remained untouched, its peace rippled outward, carried by every heart that had been touched by the story. The gentle one's legacy had become eternal, not through temples or monuments, but through the quiet revolution of love reborn. Centuries rolled onward like waves upon an infinite shore, and the story of the gentle one passed from tongue to tongue until it no longer belonged to a single place or people, but became the heartbeat of humanity itself. It lived in the lullabies whispered to children, in the vows of monks and wanderers, in the silent prayers of those who had lost faith yet still hoped. The world that had once been divided by walls and fear began to soften, not through miracles, but through the simple and steady return of remembrance. It began in small, almost invisible ways. A stranger offering food to another during a storm. A soldier choosing mercy over revenge. A child refusing to crush a helpless insect because she had read about the elephant who forgave. These moments rippled through generations, subtle as wind-shaping mountains, slow as roots reclaiming stone. No government decreed it, no temple demanded it. Compassion grew like wild grass in the cracks of civilization. The forests that had once been cut to feed human hunger began to grow again, tended not by decree but by love. The descendants of those who had once hunted now guarded the groves. In schools, teachers told their students the story not as myth but as memory, reminding them that peace is not a thing to be found but a way to be lived. In the midst of this new world was a city built around an ancient green heart, the last remnant of the original forest. Towers of glass rose like mountains, but none taller than the tree of peace that still stood, its silver bark glowing faintly under the lights of 1,000 lanterns. The air was filled with music and prayer, laughter and silence intertwined. Pilgrims came from every corner of the earth, not to worship but to remember. Scientists and mystics worked side by side, studying the harmony of the earth's frequencies and finding that the vibrations of compassion, the same measured, centuries ago resonated within the human heart. It was no longer seen as faith or philosophy but as fact. Kindness altered the rhythm of the world, and so humanity entered a quiet golden age, not through conquest or invention, but through awakening. Yet even in peace, the gentle one's spirit watched with calm awareness. For all things, even light, must be tended lest they fade. One night, a great storm swept over the city. Winds howled, lightning clawed across the sky, and the people feared for the ancient tree at their center. But when morning came, the tree still stood unharmed, its leaves glistening with rain, its branches heavy with blossoms that had not been there the night before. They were white as moonlight, their fragrance so sweet it brought tears to the eyes of those who smelled it. The monks declared that the forest had spoken again, reminding them that beauty often blooms after the storm. Among those who visited that morning was a young girl named Amara. She was small, curious, and unburdened by the weight of history. Yet when she stood before the tree, something stirred inside her that she did not understand. She placed her small hand upon the bark and closed her eyes. The hum beneath her palm was faint but steady, and in the space between her breaths, she heard a voice not loud, not foreign, but as if it rose from her own heart. "Do you remember me?" Startled, she looked around, but no one was near. The voice came again, softer this time, wrapped in warmth. "Do you remember the promise?" She didn't know what promise it spoke of, but she felt no fear. Instead, she felt love so vast that it filled the air around her, love so deep it seemed older than time itself. "Who are you?" she whispered. The wind stirred, carrying a faint scent of rain and earth. "I am what you have always been," the voice said. "I am the part of you that cannot harm, cannot hate, cannot end." The girl smiled, though tears ran down her cheeks. "You're the gentle one," she said softly, as though remembering a dream. The light around her deepened, and for a moment, she saw him not in flesh, but as a being made of shimmering breath and luminous silence. An elephant vast and radiant, his eyes calm and kind. "I am everything that remembers kindness," he said. "And now you, too, must remember. The vision faded, leaving only the sound of her heartbeat matching the rhythm of the earth. From that day onward, Amara spent her life teaching others about what she had felt, though she never claimed visions or miracles. She simply said, "Peace is not something to find. It is something you are." Her words spread, and people listened because her presence carried the same stillness that had once lived in the Gentle One. She traveled across oceans, visiting lands where violence still echoed, and wherever she went, people laid down their weapons, if only for a moment, to hear her speak. Her message was simple yet impossible to ignore. The world heals where compassion walks. Years passed, and she grew old, her hair turning silver like the bark of the sacred tree. On her final journey, she returned to the city that had grown around the forest. The tree of peace still stood, its blossoms now eternal, their scent woven into the wind. She approached it slowly, her body frail but her heart luminous, and whispered, "I am home," as she pressed her hand to the trunk. The hum she remembered from childhood rose again, and she felt the same warmth envelop her. "Welcome back," the voice said, filled with infinite tenderness. "You have walked well, little one." She closed her eyes, smiling through tears. "I tried to keep your story alive." The air shimmered, and the Gentle One's form appeared once more before her, radiant and vast. "You did not keep it alive," he said. "You became it. The story lives because love chose you." Around them, petals began to fall, drifting through the light like snow. People who were nearby saw her standing there and hurried toward her, but when they reached the spot, she was gone. Only her shawl remained, resting at the base of the tree, covered in white blossoms. The monks who found it said that a soft sound, like the rumble of a great heart, echoed through the forest that night and did not fade until dawn. And so the story continued. In every era, someone heard the call. Sometimes it was a monk meditating beneath the stars, sometimes a child saving a wounded bird, sometimes a mother forgiving the one who had wronged her. The Gentle One lived through them all, not as a ghost, but as the quiet force that guided the hand toward mercy, the word toward kindness, the heart toward understanding. As the centuries unfolded, the tree of peace grew ever taller, its roots deepening across the land until the forest became a network of light beneath the surface of the world. People said its roots connected every living thing, carrying messages of compassion across oceans and deserts, through mountains and cities, reminding all that life was one unbroken prayer. Eventually, even the stars seemed to echo its rhythm. Astronomers studying distant signals in space discovered a repeating pulse that matched exactly the frequency measured at the base of the Tree of Peace. They called it the heartbeat of Earth to the scientists. It was a mystery of physics. To the monks, it was the Gentle One's voice spreading beyond the planet, teaching even the heavens the sound of forgiveness. And somewhere beyond the limits of sight, in a place where time folded into silence, the Gentle One watched, neither god nor ghost, but a living echo of love. He saw that his story had become more than memory yet, had become the fabric of existence. For every time a being forgave, every time a creature spared another, every time a single heart chose peace over fear, the rhythm of the universe grew stronger, its light more complete. He no longer needed to speak, for compassion had learned to speak for itself. And so the world moved forward, golden and fragile, illuminated by the smallest acts of goodness that kept the stars burning. The forest remained eternal, untouched, the great tree shining at its center like a beacon to all who wandered. And on certain nights, when the air was still and the moon hung low, those who listened carefully could hear it, the soft rumble of steps through the mist, the sound of an elephant moving slowly through eternity, carrying the peace of countless generations in his heart. The sound would rise and fall like the rhythm of breath, and if one closed their eyes, they would hear the words the Gentle One had spoken since the beginning of time. Love endures. Compassion remembers. Peace is you. And with that, the world continued to dream, forever held in the embrace of a story that had never truly ended. Because kindness, once awakened, does not die, it only changes form, waiting patiently in the quiet, ready to be remembered again. In the end, the story of the Gentle One is not just a tale of an elephant who forgave, it is the mirror of what lives inside every human heart. Through countless generations, his spirit walked beside the weary, the broken, and the lost, reminding each soul that compassion is not weakness, but the highest form of strength. His forgiveness was not born from ignorance, but from understanding, the kind that sees pain even within cruelty and light even within darkness. From the forest where he once lived to the cities that now shine with restless light, his presence lingers in the quiet moments when someone chooses love over anger, when a stranger helps another without reason, when a heart opens instead of closing. The Gentle One's story whispers to us that every act of kindness, no matter how small, carries power far beyond what the eye can see. It travels like ripples through the ocean of life, touching countless others in unseen ways. His message asks us to remember that peace is not something we wait for, it is something we create, breath by breath, moment by moment. And as you let this story settle in your mind, perhaps you too can feel it, the quiet pulse of compassion beating beneath the noise of the world, calling you home to your own gentle nature. If tonight your heart feels heavy, may this tale remind you that softness is not a flaw. It is the seed of awakening. Forgiveness frees not only the one forgiven, but also the one who forgives. So take a slow breath, release what no longer serves you, and let peace fill the space it leaves behind. The Gentle One walks with you, even now, through every act of love, through every word of patience, through every breath of understanding. Let his story become part of yours. And if it has touched something deep within you, stay with us, here in this circle of calm hearts and timeless stories. Subscribe to Buddhism for Sleep, and each night, let wisdom and compassion guide you gently into rest. May the Gentle One's peace live in your dreams, and may his love awaken again and again through you.